2011 RAV4 Toyota. We're going to pull this transmission, another front wheel drive, second one here. So the first thing we're going to do is get these covers off, get the battery out, the air box off, get that cover off, and then we'll be a little further down in there, see what else we got to do. All right, let's go. There's three 10mm inside here to get this lower box out. Alright, you can see now it opens up a lot in there. So we got to get this tray out of the way, which is a 10-10. I think one there. Disconnect these brackets, and then we're going to end up taking this starter out. After that, it looks like I'm going to take the shifter cable off, and then the bell housing bolts. So there's one there. There's 17s. There's probably going to be a few of them. There's another one right there. Okay. Ground under these wires. Okay. Wires out of the way. Oh, so now we got this one. Okay, two more 12s right there. Yeah, look at that. Okay, starter next. And shifter cable. Sometimes these clips are a pain in the ass. There you go. This little clip that goes to hold the shifter cable on. And we got a 12mm down there. Actually, it could be done from the bottom. There's another 12 back there the shifter cable's hooked onto. Here. Okay, see where that one was back there. Now, we've got another connector. Everywhere you look, there's a wire loom connector. Okay, unplugging all this electrical stuff. Unplug. Everything is connected to the transmission. Unplug it. Okay, that is a ground that goes to the transmission. Alright, so this whole ground is going to come loose. Now, shifter cable can come out from everywhere. Come up here out of the way like that. Okay, let's get this starter out. Alright, so the parts washer came on in the background, super loud. What I'm doing here is two 14mm bolts that hold the starter in. Alright, so here I'm just going back, making sure all the electrical plug-ins are unplugged, the vent tube, make sure all the electrical's unhooked from the transmission. Alright, so now what I'm doing is taking the bolts out of the cooler and unbolting the cooler from the side of the transmission. Alright, now here we go down to the top 3 bell housing bolts. 14mm, super tight. Take those 3 bolts out, and then that'll be all for the top for now. Later, when I get everything on the bottom unhooked, I will come back and unhook that motor mount that is holding it up. But when I do that, I have to hang the engine from the top. So before I hang it, I go underneath and take everything apart. And then when I'm done taking everything apart on the bottom and the transmission is ready to come out and there's 1 bolt left holding it in, then I come to the top, hang the motor, take that motor mount bolt out, drop it down a little bit, and then be able to take the transmission out. Alright, so now once we get the tires off, we're going to get axle nuts taken off, and then bottom ball joint, probably go from there. Alright, so the next thing I'm going to do is take these side pieces off, and then I'm going to take this motor mount bolt off right here, and I'm going to take this whole front piece off, this metal piece right here. These two on the other side. 1, 2 here, 2 here, and then these rails will come off. And then my plan is right now, unbolt this and then loosen these few bolts that hold this subframe in, take all these out, and then loosen this side, and then it'll kind of lower down and swivel out of the way. And that'll give me room to get this transmission out. So we'll see how that plan works. That's what we're gonna try. All right, we'll start with these first. So now stuff is opening up big time. Got the transmission just all out here now. I'm going to do torque converter bolts through this hole. I'm going to take this mount the rest of the way off. Here's the cooler lines I'm just going to take off. I just unbolted the cooler instead of taking the antifreeze lines off. So we'll just take these out. We got to flush that anyway. And then it looks like I'm going to get the ball joints off and get these axles out. And then try to swing this thing back out of the way a little bit, and we'll see what else is to it. But after this, we're looking kind of open. I gotta get this axle out. This little thing here, it's just gonna be those 2 bolts, and it should slide out. We will see. And also these sway bar links come off. At 1, 2, 3, 14s, take this bracket off. Okay, well, it looks like there might be one more right there. Alright, so the washer came back on, and it's not bearable for the video. So here I am taking that final bolt out, and that'll take this bracket the rest of the way off. And then the next thing here is I'm just going to get 1 more of the bell housing bolts out that I can reach right here. Next thing in line is take these sway bar links off, both sides. Next thing we're going to do here is take these 3 17mm off, and it releases the bottom ball joint. So you can take the control arm loose so you can get the axle out. So as you can see now, that control arm is loose and that end of the axle is pulled out of there. Now these two 12s here are going to take this where you can slide the axle out. The other one just pops out of the transmission with the pry bar. On this one I had some trouble getting that thing out of there, so I slid the subframe over before I took the axle out. There ended up being something wrong with the axle, so when we went back together we put a new one in. So on the other axle here we are going to take these two 12s out and get this thing slid out. So this axle was really stuck in there because something was wrong with it and I couldn't get a good angle with the pry bar. So since I had to move the subframe out of the way anyway, I just waited until I had all these bolts taken out here, take this side all the way out with all the bolts that go through holding the subframe up. This is one here, and then on the other side just take them all out except for one that it can pivot on. So all of these come out except for this one, and I'll let that one, the whole thing will pivot on that, so the other side will pivot out of the way. Also the rack bolts up in here, 17mm rack bolts, because you got to disconnect the rack and pinion from the subframe also. After you get those bolts loose, then we'll take the rack bolts out here. After you get the rack bolts out, you can come over here and take all these out except for that one. So right here I'm just loosening that one and you can see it drop down right there. Okay, so the last thing holding this up is this motor mount on the back of the engine here. So I'm going to take these 14mm off and it'll let this thing drop all the way down. Okay, so now the subframe is just hanging by that one bolt, and we're going to slide it out of the way here. Slide it over far enough to get the transmission past it. So now you can see with this slid back out of the way, there's a lot more room in there now, and I'm really going to have to work to get this axle out. I try prying it, can't get it out. I end up having to beat it out with the pry bar and a hammer. Okay, so now that this is all out, the axle's all out of the way, we can take that back motor mount off there. We take the torque converter bolts out here. We put a jack underneath the transmission, and we take out the rest of all the bell housing bolts. And before we do all that, we got to hang it from the top. Everything's loose. We're going to take this motor mount off right here. So before we do that, we got to hang this thing from the top. So we're going to hang it from the top, and then we'll come down here and finish taking it out. All right, so what we're going to do is take this chain, we're going to hook it to the motor. So I got like this bolt right here that I'm going to take out, this one right here, and then there's a hole right there that I'm going to put a bolt in. So between that hole and this one, this chain will come up here like this, and then the pick will pick it up and hold that engine up while I take the transmission out. Alright, so now what we're going to do is we're going to take some 2x4s and put across here. A 2x4 and a 2x4, and then I'll set my pick thing on that. Time to play Legos with the wood blocks. now that we have this thing hung, we can get this bolt out of here and probably take this whole mount off. All right, now that we have this all hooked up to a chain, we can just lower it down. Grab up here, the whole thing. Slow it down a little bit, maybe another click. I think that looks pretty good. Now you can see how far down that is. And if this pick wasn't on here, then the whole motor would just fall out of the bottom, because the only other thing holding it is this mount. So now we go back to the bottom, take the rest of the bell housing bolts out, and this thing should slide out of there. All right, so now the rest of these is here, 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 and here. And then this thing should come out. So let's see what we got. So the last thing you want to do is drop this transmission on the floor. So usually the dowel pins are corroded and it's kind of hard to get it separated. So you got to kind of wiggle and pry and wiggle and pry. And I'm just kind of careful with the way I do this. Alright, here we go. Not a huge deal. Step by step, transmission's out, and reverse it to put it back in. Alright everybody, thanks for watching and see you on the next one.